Damien slightly parts his lips, his tone low. His eyes narrow, studying the two before him as he asks who they are, and whether they know him. The question itself is enough to make Jackson's face twist with irritation, while Sophia stiffens, disbelief flashing across her eyes. Feeling humiliated, Sophia bites her lip. A flood of anger rises in her chest as she wonders what in the world is wrong with Damien, acting as though he doesn't know them at all. Damien's hand suddenly grips Jackson's arm, prying his own shirt free from the man's hold. His voice remains steady as he tells Jackson to let go. First bet forward, looking out. Just then, Abel and Victor stepped out of the tent. Abel called out to ask what the matter was. Victor followed, his voice more formal, as he called out, "Young Master Damien," demanding to know what was going on. Abel took one look at the people standing before Damien, and was about to greet them, until recognition stopped the words dead in his throat. Victor, too, upon recognizing them, clenched his jaw and muttered a faint, uneasy sound. Abel turned toward the woman, his voice tight as he called her name, Sophia. Damien glanced at his brother, curious, asking if Abel knew her. Abel stares at him dumbfounded before saying the name again as though the reminder alone should be enough. Sophia. Sophia, with her cheeks flushed from embarrassment, averts her gaze. Abel reminds Damon that Sophia was once his fiancée. Damon looks back at the pair, his expression unreadable, his eyes fixed on Jackson with detached curiosity. Jackson meets his gaze with a glare, barely containing his anger. Then, as Damon continues to stare, the echoes of a memory force their way back. He remembers being dragged out by security guards under the rain, soaked and desperate, shouting Sophia's name again and again, pleading for her to talk to him, begging her not to do this. He remembers calling out that she couldn't just leave him like this. And then another voice had called out from the porch, someone asking who Damon was. He remembers that too. Jackson stood there that night, one arm around Sophia's waist as she told him that Damon was the ex-fiancé she had mentioned before. Jackson's reply came sharp and dismissive, saying he remembered that Damon was that good for nothing. The words had pierced deeper than fists. Damien had stammered in disbelief, asking what Cyrus had just said. When the guards let him go, he stood drenched, his eyes locked on Aileen as he called to her again. He had asked who the man beside her was, demanding to know how she could end the engagement so one-sidedly. His voice broke as he said it must be false. But it had to be. Aileen had only sighed. She had spoken his full name, Damien Haxon, and asked if he still didn't understand the situation. Holding on to Cyrus, she explained coldly that their engagement had only ever been because of their grandfather's promise, but that all of that was already in the past. She asked him if he really thought anything she said wasn't true. The rain mixed with tears on his face as she went on, asking if he thought it made sense at all. She reminded him that she was Aileen Russell. Her words cut deeper with each syllable as she questioned how a good-for-nothing from a small noble house could ever be compatible with her. He had sobbed through the rain, asking how she could say such things. Cyrus had then led her away, telling Damien he'd let him go quietly out of respect for Aileen. Aileen had chuckled at that, remarking that the good-for-nothing was so embarrassing. Cyrus told Damien not to appear before them again, his arm wrapped casually around her. As they walked off together, smiling like new lovers, he had told Damien that if he understood, he should get lost. Damien had stood alone in the rain, his head bowed, his chest hollowed out. Then his trembling hands had clenched tight. Rage overtook heartbreak. He charged forward, shouting, determined to at least land a blow. Cyrus hadn't even turned at first. Hearing Damien's rush and recognizing the sound, he had sighed. Then his fist had lashed out like a blur, striking Damien squarely across the face. Punches had fallen like rain. Damien had hit the ground hard, coughing up blood, the world spinning. Still, Cyrus had stepped closer, grabbed his collar, and mocked him, saying he tried to show mercy, but Damien didn't know his place. Calling him filth, he'd grinned, then beaten him until the world blurred white. And even then, Damien's gaze had found Aileen. She had stood there, arms folded, silent. The image lingers still when Damien returns to the present, his eyes narrowing slightly. It had been raining. That day, too, when he was beaten to a pulp and dumped like trash. Now, Jackson calls out to Sophia, asking if she's all right, checking that she isn't hurt. She answers that she's fine. Damien watches the pair in silence, his anger carefully contained. Deep down, though, the fury hasn't faded. Even after all this time, he's still furious. Sophia scoffs, her tone sharp as she says she sees now. He must be embarrassed about what happened back then, pretending to be calm and collected. Damien frowns faintly, uncertain what she means. She continues, accusing him of acting like he doesn't know her, saying he hasn't changed at all, that he's still just as pathetic. Jackson lets out a mocking laugh, wide and loud, asking if that's what all this is about. He says he thought maybe Damien had become someone important and was trying to cut ties. Then a flicker of mischief enters his eyes, a cruel idea taking root. He straightens his expression and stretches out his hand, saying he hadn't thought he'd ever see Damien again, but that it was good to see him. Damien studies him in silence, then asks what kind of act this is supposed to be. Jackson feigns confusion, saying there's no act, that he only wants to shake hands since he's happy to see him. Inside, though, Jackson's thoughts twist darkly. He mocks Damien inwardly, thinking the fool must believe himself famous now. He decides he'll teach him a lesson he won't forget. Damien looks at the extended hand for a moment longer, his expression unreadable. Then he lets out a short, quiet chuckle and agrees, saying that if this is what Jackson wants, so be it. Jackson's grin widens, his aura shifting as he prepares to strike. For a heartbeat, he's triumphant until he finds himself suddenly lifted off the ground. Damien's cold eyes locked on him. Safia gasps, horror seizing her as she sees Jackson's body hanging in the air. The air grows heavy with killing intent. Damien's eyes burn cold and bright. A second later, he slams Jackson down with brutal force, the impact cracking through the dirt. With a falsely clumsy smile, Damien apologizes lightly, saying he couldn't control his strength. Inside, his darker voice laughs, admitting he'd wanted to beat Jackson anyway, and thanking him for the opportunity, calling him a bastard. Sevenless. Shocked by the display, Safia covers her mouth and calls Jackson's name, her voice trembling. Jackson's hand twitches on the ground, then his body jerks upright. Blood drips from his nose, but rage drowns out the pain. Safia's relief flickers back to life as she sees him rise, laughing low and dangerously. Jackson grips the hilt of his sword. Seeing this, Abel tenses with sudden panic. Ma surges from Jackson as he begins to draw the blade, shouting furiously and calling Damien a son of a, but Damien only laughs softly, tilting his head as though amused, and points at Jackson's face, teasing that whoever bleeds first loses. Abel's eyes go wide. Sweat runs down his temple as he stammers Damien's name. Before Jackson can move further, a voice cuts through the tension, deep, commanding tone, telling him to stop. The authority in it freezes Jackson mid-ocean. He turns, sees who it is, and his voice falters as he calls the man master. The figure approaches, each step exuding oppressive dark energy. His tone is calm yet deathly as he says, "It's remarkable that Damien, the useless brat, has become this strong in such a short time." Damien remains composed, though his gaze sharpens. He hadn't expected Jackson to have someone like this behind him. Still, with measured confidence, he asks, scoffing lightly under his breath, whether this man knows him, too. Inwardly, he acknowledges the power emanating from the stranger. It's formidable, at least mid-class level. The man stops before them, his eyes narrowing on Damien as he asks just how strong he's become. Then he turns to Jackson, telling him that if he's done fooling around, they're leaving. Jackson bristles, shouting that the bastard hit his face, but the man's glare silences him before the words can finish leaving his mouth. Without another glance, the man orders him to follow. Jackson clicks his tongue, sheaths his sword, and mutters in frustration, "Damn it all." As he turns away, he sends Damien a final venomous thought. "Just wait and see." Damien watches them retreat, his voice light and teasing as he wonders aloud what's wrong with them, if they're really just going to leave like that. The man halts mid-stride, turns his head slightly, and says his name, Jack Hunor. He tells Damien to remember it. Then he continues walking, leaving only the echo of his dark aura behind. Abel, Victor, and Damien stand quietly as the group disappears into the distance. Jack Hunor's final words linger, that they will meet again soon enough. Damien's gaze follows them, his lips curling into a faint, curious smile. He repeats the name under his breath, Jack Hunor, telling himself to remember it well. Then, as something fierce stirs behind his eyes, a grin spreads across his face. Victor and Abel exchange glances, sensing what's coming. Damien, his mind already ignited by the memory of that name, murmurs that